Good evening. I'm calling the Finance Committee for November 25th, 2024 to order. We have several resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 129, a resolution to authorize the City of Lancaster Auditor Tricia Nettles to request an advance of funds from the Fairfield County Treasurer James Bonson for the city's apportionment of property tax settlement for 2025, coming from the Finance Committee. And Auditor Nettles, please.
Yes, this is an annual piece of legislation. In order for me to request from the county to get the cash advances for our settlements, I have to get your permission via legislation. This is just an annual piece.
Yeah, we do this on an annual basis. You're requesting 3 readings. Would you be interested in 2 readings?
Yes, I'm fine with 2 readings, and earlier I can get it up to them so we don't miss their deadline, which is in January, but their deadline is sometime in January.
Right, and the idea is try to clear the docket as much, because as you all recall, January, we have a ton of legislation, and if we can clean some of this up, I'd like to do that. Any objections to that? We'll do 2 readings. Thank you. Temporary resolution number 130, a resolution to authorize and then and now certificate for the Community Development Block Grant Fund 2073, CHIP Home Program Fund 2083, and for the Healthy Homes Grant 2026, year ended 2024, project expenditures coming from the Economic Development Committee. Councilman Hoop.
Yes, Chaslin will be here to share about it.
Good evening, Mr. President and Council. I have met with Auditor Nettles, and this will be a new standing annual piece for the funds kept at HUD. So it's for the projects that are currently ongoing so they can get paid in 2025.
Any questions? And we're looking for 3 readings?
Yep.
Okay. Does it need to go 3 readings?
It can be, like, if we can get it 2 readings, that would be good. That way she has it. So when she starts out the 2025 budget year, she would already have the then and now ready.
For any expenditures before our first meeting in January. Perfect. Any objections to that? I hear none. And your second will be Christina?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Now we have temporary resolution 131, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for the construction of the Zane Alley Sewer Replacement Project, coming from Water Pollution Control. Councilman Wing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project is actually located just out the door here, across the street, the alley between City Hall and the police station, 300 feet of sanitary sewer that is in desperate need of replacement. And I'll invite Stephen Well-Said to come up and explain more.
All right, thank you, Michael. Council, good evening to the rest of you. So yeah, this project, as noted, we got about 300 feet of sanitary sewer in very bad shape. We're going to do a replacement of the project. We did advertise it. Did have the bid opening 2 Fridays ago on the 15th. We only had 1 bidder, but they came in only a few % over engineer's estimates, so we were thankful for that. And it's Rock River Construction, a local contractor. And obviously at this point, the bid was reviewed. It looks like everything's okay to go, so we'll be ready to sign contracts once we get this legislation approved. Keep moving forward with it. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has.
Councilman Wing.
Requesting 2 readings so we can get this passed and signed by the end of the year. And Mr. Ailes will be my second.
Perfect. Thank you. Temporary resolution 132, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the 2025 sewer rehabilitation project. Again, coming from Water Pollution Control. Councilman Wing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, lost my train of thought there. But basically, all the sewers in the city they have this neat process where they use closed circuit television. They examine the oldest sewers and see which ones need replaced each year, and that's what this piece is for.
Yeah, correct. Annually, we do the CCTV work, and we have found some sewers that we feel are in a poor enough condition that some very short-term rehabilitation is needed. We have a combined sewer on Madison Avenue between 6th and Mulberry, another combined sewer on East Main Street near the intersection with Starrett Avenue, some sanitary sewers in the Stonegate Meadows subdivision, which is Fog Drive, that area. Those are relatively new sewers, but we have a lot of infiltration concerns there, unfortunately, that's adding a lot of flow to the pump station that Mike Nixon and his department have down there. So this project would include some grouting there to obviously reduce the stormwater that's getting into our sanitary sewer. And then on the storm sewer side, we have a storm sewer on East 6th Avenue between High and Maple that we're looking to get rehabbed, and we may add in a storm sewer on 8th Avenue, and that runs through the vacant field there that used to be the old drive-in behind Todd's Mountain View. And that's going to be pending some findings that are going to happen here in the next month or two. But again, yeah, this legislation is just for the engineering agreement to design the rehab project needed for those sewers.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right. Councilwoman Tiner will be my second on this one, and I'll also be requesting 2 readings so we can get this started at the start of the year.
Very good. Everybody okay with that? Next is temporary resolution 133, a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the construction and inspection of the 2025 Street Improvement Program -paving project, coming from Public Works and Councilman Tiner.
This is just what it says, authorizing to advertise for bids. Do you have anything to say for the paving, Carrie?
I don't have anything to
Nothing here
add.
unless
I was going to say,
Stevens-
I would offer Engineer
Okay.
Kurt Schonk to come up if he would like to speak.
Good evening. So this is our annual program our paving program for the 3 mil levy money. I'll just go quickly through how we select our streets. I think it's an important reminder every year. There are things that we look at, our traffic. So the higher traffic, the quicker it's going to get attention, the condition, the pavement condition. We have that surveyed. We consult that out every 3 or 4 years. They'll come in and do an assessment on every street, every public road in the city, and they give us a score on those roads. We have to coordinate with our utilities to make sure we're not going to pave a road that's going to get tore up right away, or at least within 5, 6, 7 years, and that can be difficult. And sometimes we have to pass on areas that we would otherwise like to get paved. Funding. So all of these streets that we're going to talk about or that for this project are local streets that are not eligible for federal funding. Our collectors and our arterials have other pots of money that we can use to pave those, so we try not to do any of our local streets on this program. Then we get together with the engineer's office staff and some of our LDOT staff, and we get together and we talk about what streets we're going to pave the following year. Something that we did last year and we're going to do this year, we are trying to work our maintenance projects, our microsurfacing in with our resurfacing projects to finish out entire neighborhoods. The thing about the microsurfacing is it's just a thin little layer that buys more time. So we think it's important to get into those neighborhoods because you might get a street that gets microsurfaced and the next street over is falling apart and they wonder why didn't my street get paved. That one didn't look too bad and it got paved. It's a different treatment. It's less than what we're doing here. So that's kind of the rundown. I have a list of the streets here. I can read those off. It's kind of a long list and I'm not sure if you have those in front of you or not, but they're on the west side of town over around kind of Harrison and West 5th. We're also doing Groff, which was one of the streets that we did not do this year, even though it was in the bid package because the water line needed replaced. We found that out after we got started. West 8th, West 7th, Mulberry, Smith Avenue, just to name a few. So I'll take any questions if you have any. Okay. Thank you.
Any other, okay, Councilman Tuner, any? Your second.
Mr. Leuchtenberg.
I've asked the other ones, if you have any interest in suspending the third reading, or you want to go the three? I mean, getting the year
Yeah,
started. and-
we could just, because it's just go for bids. So, yeah, we could do that. We could suspend.
Any
Like-
objections around the table? Thank you. We want to make sure he's plenty busy, right?
Doesn't have anything else to do.
Next is temporary resolution number 134, a resolution to amend appropriation budgets and to subsequently amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor, finance committee, and I defer to Auditor Nettles to explain what you're doing.
Yes, this is an annual piece as well. This is where we're going through, my staff that went through and looked at everybody's 2024 expense budgets and bringing them in line with their cash on hand or revenue as of December 31st. So we needed to go through and lower expense budgets to meet their cash. So that's all this is.
And you need that done by the end of the year, obviously.
Yes, correct. I need it in 2 readings, please.
We're looking at 2 readings, and Councilman Ailes, would you be the second, please? Thank you. That is it for the resolutions. Moving on to the ordinances. Temporary ordinance 52-24, an ordinance to grant to South Central Power Company, its successors and assigns a franchise for the right to acquire, construct, maintain, and operate in the streets, thoroughfares, alleys, bridges, and public places. Places of the city of Lancaster and its successors. Lines for the transmission and distribution of electric energy to the city of Lancaster and the inhabitants thereof for light, heat, power, and other purposes, and for the transmission of the same within, through, or across said city of Lancaster, and to declare an emergency. Coming from the Law Committee and Councilman Kreitz.
Yes, thank you. To comply with state law, South Central Power must have an agreement to provide services within the city. The current agreement has expired, and this legislation is to approve a new one. Law Director Hall, did you want to provide anything additional?
I just wanted to say, essentially, we're giving South Central Power here the exact same rights and privileges that we've given to AEP or Ohio Power, as they're called. The terms of this agreement are the same in terms of length, which is 25 years for both, and then in terms of renewal, which is 1 year successive renewals thereafter. So the thought was level the playing field and keep everybody on the same terms and conditions, and address this again in the future if necessary. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Mr. Wolfinger is my second.
I'll be happy to.
It's 2 readings.
And I'm assuming you're doing the 2 readings because the contract has expired and you'd like to get it put together by the end of the year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I assume there's no other questions. Temporary ordinance 53-24, an ordinance to deed 2 parcels of city property, 053806111 and 05358030000, containing 3.009 plus or minus acres of land from the city to the city to be consolidated into 1 parcel. And that's also coming from the Law Committee and Councilman Kreitz.
Yes, thank you. Is there anyone in the administration or Law Director Hall that would like? Law Director Hall?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Sorry. So you all probably remember back in June, you passed legislation to purchase the 1-acre parcel next to Engine House 1 on East Main Street with the thought of future development. No, I'm sorry, that's Engine House 3 on East Main Street. but with the thought of future development potentially on the front of both parcels. And then on the back, the fire department had already planned and had designs started for a maintenance and repair facility that would span across the back of both lots. In order to get those designs approved through the city, actually, it has to be one parcel. The building can't be sitting on two different parcels. And so the assistant city engineer already went ahead and got the entirety of all of the real property resurveyed. And the county auditor's office just let us know this week that all they need us to do is file a new deed that puts those two parcels together so that they can go ahead and give it one parcel number, and that will solve all of the problems moving forward. So that's the goal tonight, and I asked for suspension because you're really not divesting the city of any property rights. You're just basically moving it from two different parcel numbers down into one parcel number. Thank you.
Mr. Bizjack is my second.
Thank you. And any questions regarding total suspension tonight? Thank you. Moving on to temporary ordinance 54-25, an ordinance to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a lease contract with the Fairfield County Commissioners for the second floor of the city annex building, 123 East Chestnut Street, for juvenile court services. Also, I know this is coming from the Administrative Services Committee, Councilman Lechtenberg.
This is a walk-on, correct, Councilman Moore?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd ask the Safety Service Director, please talk to this one.
Yes, thank you. And my apologies for having this as a walk-in piece. I found out just recently that we have a lease agreement that is expiring for our 121 East Chestnut. We rent the third floor to Fairfield County Juvenile Court, and I missed that this was expiring this year. So I've been working with Law Director Hall on putting together a new lease agreement. And then she reminded me politely that I needed legislation to be able to execute said agreement. Because our agreement expires at the end of this year, I asked to walk it in so that we could at least get 2 readings on this, so that we can get council approval, and then I can get it to the county so that they can also get it to the commissioners and have that read before the end of December so that we can enter into this agreement.
I have a question.
What? Go ahead.
I know we've done this or I've been sitting here to do it a couple different times. I was curious on the past 2 times that we've done those lease agreements, there's been an increase in the rent, but this has no increase over the previous one. So I was curious on why we're doing that this time.
So I looked in the records to try and find where the amounts were actually derived from, and I didn't have a good answer. And again, we're on a short timeline. The rent revenue goes back into helping maintain the building. So based on what we've spent in that building over the last few years, I did not see a need to increase it over the next 3 years. If council wishes that I do that, I'm more than happy to. Again, this has not gone to the county yet. I just, based on what we've spent in maintenance, and I couldn't find where the rental rates were actually derived from, like an appraisal or anything. So I just thought it was best to keep it flat until I can maybe get an appraisal in the future on what we should be leasing.
I appreciate the answer. I don't know if that makes any sense in terms of you can look at the previous ones and figure out what the percentage increase was for the lease. So, I mean, everything and what we're dealing with costs increased, whether it's our property, they're dealing with the same thing. So, again, I was just concerned or confused on like I said, it was just a standard 3% or 4% increase, and there isn't one in this, so I'm not sure why we would leave it flat for the next 3 years. And then as far as, explain to me, or maybe the law director can explain to me the 30 days intent to discontinue, or if it continues, it just continues after the 3 years at the same price? Does that make sense, what I asked, I guess?
Yeah,
Or did I ask a question?
Yeah, you're talking about the holdover provision, I believe. And I did add language to this because I thought the holdover provision was not necessarily ironclad. So the holdover provision says that they can continue to rent the building at a rate that is higher monthly every 30 days, but then it's a month-to-month tenancy at that point. So I did add language to change that because, while I don't think that the county would do it, we need to have a right to terminate the tenancy when we need to terminate the tenancy. And so I did put in a 30 days notice provision to do that so that they couldn't hold over indefinitely. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was, again, curious because I know we're moving some people out of that building. What's the future for that building? And
We
then-
still have plenty of people in the building.
Yeah, and then at the same time, I think we just did some legislation to add a bathroom for
Yes,
whatever dollar amount, so
correct.
that's where we could recoup some of our costs on the bathroom, was my thought, so.
So I might be able to help you if I can dig into my archives. I have spreadsheets and things that I did when I was treasurer, square footage analysis of that type of thing, rent for all this. I know we've got 2 readings on the books. You probably need to get this done by the end of the year since
Yes.
the lease has matured. Let me dig that out at council's pleasure and share it with everybody.
That would be super helpful, thank you.
And maybe that might answer those questions. I can't remember back that far, but I do have something somewhere, believe me.
I know, yeah, it was just a
Good
thought,
question.
because
Very good question.
usually those continuations are some kind of change. So,
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Luchtenberg, I know this was sent out to everybody last minute today.
I don't have a copy of it in front of me, so.
That was, yeah, you're right, there weren't copies printed apparently. But we're not going to do anything today.
Right.
We'll get some information, make I guess I'm supposed to be your second, that's what I saw.
Okay.
I mean, I
That's
just got
fine.
one, I printed off the computer. So I'm willing to do the second. I will get information for the law director, what I can find in Tom's files now. I hope I have it somewhere on a Excel spreadsheet somewhere, I hope. And it's.
Word knows you made enough of them.
Yeah, I know. Sorry to put you, I'll just apologize because I'm chair of the committee.
Not a problem.
For that.
Yeah.
Any other questions as we're digging into things, anybody else want to add to the list to dig into? Okay. Thank you. And, excuse me. And that concludes the resolutions, or the ordinances, I'm sorry. Other discussion items, departmental updates. Do we have any updates from the city? The newlywed.
Just a brief update for council. You guys have been dealing with this for 2 years. Over the last 2 weeks, Lieutenant Caton, our administrative lieutenant, has done a phenomenal job meeting with Robertson Construction and getting a phasing outline done for the HVAC project at the police department. It does look like I finally have some good news that over the course of December and January, they should have the majority of the heating, the majority of the heating project done, as well as the ceiling project. And by springtime, before the weather warms up, they will have the actual cooling portion done. There were no delays and no long lead times for the chiller or air handler units, which we were kind of crossing our fingers for. So extremely good news. That whole project should be completed by well before the summer. So just wanted to give that update. You guys have been very supportive with that project, so I'm happy to report that. That's all.
Questions from council? Thank you, Chief. Any other departmental updates? I hear none. Tonight's meeting prep will be by President Porter.
Yeah, we have no special presentation by departments this evening, and therefore we will be following the agenda as written, aside from the walk-on legislation.
Thank you. Any questions of President Porter? Thank you. Moving on to other items for finance. Excuse me. First of all, I wanted to mention per Auditor Nettles' request and through the Service Safety Director, we're going to request waiving third reading on temporary ordinances 45, 46, 7, 48, 49, 50, and 51-24. We had the first reading. We're running into potential time elements. Well, I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, this is, if we could get those ordinance suspended and passed this time, this gives all of the departments ample time to complete their employee status change forms, get them in, and be able to go through that and get them into the office so we can then manually check every single one of them. If council wants to have it go 3 readings, which is fine, but it's giving a short window for the departments, like 3 days to get all their stuff into my office, rather than giving them a good 2 weeks to be able to work on it.
And perhaps next year, you and the Service Safety Director can maybe plan ahead for the 3
Yes.
readings and.
Yes.
Well, I mean, what was different this year than it has been in the past?
It's nothing, except it's like, I hate to say, like, it's hard for the departments on reacting in the holiday for them to get them, so we're at a critical mass of trying to say, we need this, we're missing this one. You're looking at a window to get 450 status change forms in a small amount of time, and make sure you have every single one of them before we move forward and start for the new year, so.
It's just, it's the purpose of 3 readings, as you know, and I'm not lecturing, but it's to give the public ample time to know what's going on in relation to operations of the city. And I truly appreciate the administrative confines that go with that, though. So I'm not going to personally object to going to 2 readings. However, next year, we should go 3.
Right, we agree, and that's why I suggested we move that back. And another factor, the auditor's homeless now. You might explain that.
No, we're in the midst of moving up to the 3rd floor of City Hall. So tomorrow, the movers are coming in, and it'll be entertaining to get us our entire office up to the 3rd floor, so.
Thank you. Any objections?
What were those numbers again?
The whole last.
All of these?
Yeah.
45 through 51.
Thank you.
The rest of the numbers. If no questions, good comment.
I think
Oh, I'm sorry, Ben.
Councilmember Teener had.
Things it has, I mean, if we're doing the same thing, and I just, I just don't see any changing it. I just think, because I mean, I kind of still have some questions on some of the employees and things, and I just, I'll vote no on anything that's going to be.
Well, I appreciate that. Did we get with her? Or, I mean, you don't want to bring it up on the council floor, or if you're, the questions?
No, I'm not. I'm just going to, there's still questions I have with the budget. There's still things, and I think that needs to all be done at the same time.
And I agree, and that'll be, I guess you won't have time for those
No.
on that. I appreciate that. Other objections? Any strong feelings?
That was mine.
Well, no, I mean, it's.
I mean, he can always ask for suspension, and we'll go from there, right?
Right. Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Can we do a blanket suspension request? Or do we need to go through all 7 of them or all 6 of them?
Yeah, you can do a blanket request for all of them, just need to be sure that we read all of them off still. Sorry. Sorry.
It's okay, it's okay.
We're not making anybody happy, are we? You have to read them all. Thank you. Now I'd like to turn the the meeting, if you will, to Mayor McDaniel to discuss temporary resolution 110-24, and he's prepared to discuss current updates we have now.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman Wolfinger. This is in regards to the budget, 110-24. As you know, we started the budget process earlier this year than we have in the past. The legislation is currently on the table, and I'm going to recommend that we continue to hold it on the table until our next meeting. This should allow you time to review it, as well as anyone from the public that wants to review the budget. It's out there for them to look at, bring any questions forward to us and or the department heads and get answers that you might have. I'm hoping to address a few of those questions you may have right now. I handed out a highlight sheet of some things I think were important and I wanted to draw your attention to that are differences from previous budgets. You may know that we've merged human resources into the Service Safety Director's office, as well as adding a facilities manager to that office based on our discussion at the last council meeting. Even with those added positions, the savings by merging the departments together is about $51,494. I listed the facility manager recommended salary. We save money by human resources and SSD's office working together and sharing resources, and admin assistant, various other things that they can share, as well as assistance with our safety director. Our service director is our human resource manager for the city by revised code. So it makes sense that these two departments work together. Hiring, firing, discipline, all that really runs through the service safety director. So human resources makes a lot of sense to be working directly with her. In addition, we've done some other merging, consolidation. We've combined planning, zoning, building, and community development into one department. We talked here at council as to why we would do that. Again, we're sharing resources, reducing overhead, and saving taxpayer money. Pete Vale, our current zoning inspector, is scheduled to retire, and as stated on council floor at this podium, when he retired, when he was going to retire, that we would not replace him. Currently, we have no plans to replace him. His replacement's already on staff and has been on staff for approximately a year now. So he should be well-trained and ready to go. There's a savings there. Community development salaries have been decreased through attrition from $545,000 down to $358,000. The general fund contribution for community services has been decreased from $150,000 down to $95,000. My goal actually was to get that down to $75,000, as we discussed before, but we were unable to get it there based on some commitments we already have. We'll look at adjusting that going forward. The general fund proposed budget is down $278,000 plus from last year. Some of the reasons for this is we were able to move some of our expenses to the police and fire levies that were approved by the voters. I am actually going to move some additional general fund expenses to police and fire levy and bring in a starred version for you to see at the next meeting. It will not change the figures at all. It'll just change the fund the money is coming from. So you will see that, expect to see that coming your way soon. Police and fire staffing is currently 84 firefighters and 79 police officers. I should say approved staffing, because I don't think either department is fully staffed yet, but we're headed in positive direction on that, hopefully soon. And hopefully we can keep that staffing for a period of time. As we know, it's tough, but we'll work forward, look for making that happen over time. The police budget, you may notice, is higher because of our air conditioning, that the chief spoke about, air conditioning heating project that we have to complete. That's been on our plate for some time. I think 2022 is when this started. Been using a temporary air conditioning unit just to get by in the summer. It's been very difficult, even finding a contractor and getting someone to actually handle that project has been difficult. So the good news from the chief tonight, looks like we're headed towards completion sometime soon. The police department budget does include an additional ComTech. Chief Snyder and Director Woody and I spoke about the staffing in the radio room, and it is very difficult currently with the staff we have to get our ComTechs appropriate breaks and lunch times. By adding an additional ComTech, this will allow that to happen on a more regular basis, something that they deserve. I will tell you, having worked at the police department for 30 years, many of those ComTechs would forego their lunch, forego their breaks, stay in the radio room, do the job, not complaining, not asking much, but this is something that we should do, and if we would have had the money, would have done a long time ago. So this will allow better staffing in the radio room when it's needed. So also included in the fire budget are plans for a new firehouse construction planning, and also the construction of the previously approved maintenance building at Firehouse number 3. So when I say construction planning, we're not ready yet to finance a new firehouse, but we're ready to plan for building a new firehouse. The tree commission budget includes one additional employee. As many of you know, Councilman Ailes knows firsthand because he's attended most of the tree commission meetings. They have a lot on their plate, and they haven't had a lot of help, and this is an effort to improve that situation. It should be noted that they asked for help last year, and they were denied due to budget constraints, but I think we're in a position where we can fund this position and help the tree commission to get its work done. The budget also includes facility investments at City Hall and the City Hall Annex, painting and repairing of the interior of City Hall, windows and lighting. We are getting a $103,000 grant for the lighting and windows. We're doing flooring on the main floor of the annex, excuse me. If you were in the annex, that floor has not been replaced in probably 50 years, and it's in bad condition. It's actually kind of embarrassing to look at, but we're going to try to update that. There's currently no facilities, bathroom facilities in the basement. We're also putting money in the budget to add that to the annex building to allow our employees to have a place to. Currently, right now, they have to go upstairs, and there's a very small bathroom in the engineer area, but there's a public bathroom out in the lobby. It's kind of inconvenient for everyone. This will be a good upgrade for that building. It should be noted that we, the city, occupy every area of the main floor and the basement. So, all departments have seen increases in their insurance costs, salaries based on collective bargaining and/or pending legislation, benefits, inflationary costs, supplies, equipment, contracts. Everything's up for everybody. You notice that in the budget increase. Improvements in the budget. Some of them you're going to see tornado siren equipment, tornado siren maintenance, IT improvements, $360,000 for City Hall improvements. This is the planning part of it. As you know, we're looking at approximately $5 to $5.5 million renovation of City Hall, something that hasn't been done in really decades for the exterior. We will keep you posted, but I think Scully Caldwell is about ready to give us some more information, hopefully very soon. And then Gas is putting additional security fencing or an automatic gate in place. That's in the budget, as well as water plant furnishing for the new water plant. There's certainly a lot more in the budget than that, but those are some of the highlights I wanted to draw your attention to. Municipal Court is adding a part-time armed security to the front of the building there where when you come in the building, they have a metal detector. They've been using unarmed temporary staffing, The judges both feel that that's not adequate for their needs, and actually Judge Fields has issued a court order saying that he's going to require armed security. We're talking part-time. They have a pretty good plan in place. He made that order effective immediately. So we will include those figures in the 25 budget. The court will pay for that out of their special projects funding. The next item I have is the community reinvestment area agreements we have with Google and Magna, and our school systems are involved, Amanda, Clear Creek, and Lancaster City Schools. The law director has been working on this for a period of time, and we have some income tax sharing that is required by the revised code as a result of the Community Reinvestment Act benefits that the properties receive. So we are working on finalizing that. That you'll see also in the budget. Parks is budgeting for improvements, including seal coat at the parking lot at Olivedale. This is shared 50-50 with the senior citizens group at Olivedale, Senior Citizens, whatever they call that particular organization, I'm not sure. We're looking at replacing the pool heater at Olivedale, roofing, which is also a 50-50 shared cost with the senior group, backflow preventer at Miller Pool, and a tiki pool slide. I think it's a renovation, not a replacement. Sanitation budget reflects an increase in refuse hauling, and this is attributed to serving the new transfer station, a different type of, I think the trucks are bigger and are hauling more. So it required a renegotiation of the contract, which is costing us additional hauling fees to haul refuse. Gas transmissions costs are up, and that is determined by market forces, and we have been advised that it's being contested through the regulating bodies, and there's typically we're told that price will drop again, but in the short term we have to pay the cost, and we hope to save later when they lower that cost factor. And then lastly, engineering added an office manager to replace the admin assistant. As you know, Deb Julian is retiring. Stormwater will participate in covering that salary, but it's kind of a billable hours. The new person would track their hours based on how many hours they provide help to engineering and how many hours they provide to stormwater. So that's kind of a highlight, and I'm certainly open to questions if you have them about any of these items and or anything else in the budget.
In the parks budget, when we met with Steve, he mentioned specifically that they were going to set aside $75,000 for Bowers Park.
He has told me the same, that it's in the budget under his improvements. It's just not listed in your comments.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
it is $75,000 for Bowers Park is in the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, on item 13, the pool heater replacement at Olivedale, is that the 50-50 shared also?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The Olivedale pool heater, is that a 50-50 share also?
No, it is not. The pool is our responsibility. He could probably ask for help with that, but it's not only do Olivedale senior citizens use that pool, but also the rec center members use that pool.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilman Teener, I know you mentioned you had some questions on the budget.
Oh, I'll get with and ask later.
Oh.
There's just some things I need to go through since we've gotten some things over the, past few days. I just have questions.
That's fine, I didn't want you excluded. Thank you.
So I would just say, the reason we're leaving this on the table is for you to be able to go back and visit these things and ask additional questions. We hope that we can have those questions answered for you to your satisfaction and be able to vote on the budget at our next meeting. So thank you.
And thank you. I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Oh, Okay, I need to do a roll call. Ailes?
Yes.
Schoonover?
Yes.
Wolfinger? Yes, we are done at 6:44.
Lancaster City Council will convene its regular meeting at 6:50.
Hi, I'm Corey Clark with Fairfield County Job and Family Services. Our mission is to protect children and elderly, encourage family stability, and promote self-reliance for a stronger community. This month, when you buy a car, truck, or SUV from Buckeye Toyota or Buckeye Honda, their Buckeye Cares program will make a donation with every vehicle they sell. From all of us at Fairfield County Job and Family Services, thank you, Buckeye, for your ongoing support for local families.
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could stand and join me in a moment of prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and finally, the wisdom to know the difference. I now call the November 25th, 2024 Lancaster City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Here.
Mr. Bizjack?
Here.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Here.
Mrs. Hoop?
Here.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Here.
Mr. Schoonover?
Here.
Ms. Diener?
Here.
Mr. Wing?
Here.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Here.
Let the record reflect that 9 members of Lancaster City Council are present at today's meeting. Since our last meeting, we had a resignation submitted for the first ward by Council Member Ehlers. He has purchased a home outside of his ward and would no longer be eligible to serve within that ward. We thank him for his service and his time on council, and we know that he will have another future here with the city, and we will be congratulating him on his service at a later date. We'll now move to the reading and disclosing of the journal.
Regular meeting minutes dated November 4th, 2024.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials. I'm sorry.
With the journal.
Yes, the journal. File the journal, please.
Second.
A motion and second to
I got
file
you.
the journal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. We'll now move to the reports of city officials.
Email dated November 5th, 2024 regarding resignation letter submitted by Mr. Ehlers. Email dated November 5th, 2024, notification of first ward resignation of Mr. Ehlers to the Fairfield Board of Elections submitted by Law Director Hall. Email dated November 5th, 2024 regarding notification on new transfer station openings submitted by Superintendent Sean Fowler. Email dated November 6, 2024 regarding Auditor's Office end of year schedule update submitted by Auditor Nettles. Email dated November 7, 2024 regarding income tax October 2024 revenue report submitted by Tax Commissioner Amy Hamilton. Email/voicemail dated November 12, 2024 regarding the new transfer station positive comments provided from the public submitted by Superintendent Sean Fowler. Multiple emails from city administration and council members dated November 23rd, 2024 regarding South Water Treatment Plant water emergency.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of city officials. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you. We will now move on to communications.
Series of emails dated November 6th through November 15th, 2024, public records request regarding tax incentives or credits submitted by Ellen Thomas of Business Insider in New York and answered by Law Director Hall. Series of emails between Jill Tagman and Council Clerk Scott dated November 7th, 2024 regarding larger scaled map of purposed annexation paperwork. Series of emails dated from November 6th through November 24th between Law Director Hall and Adam Seeley with Bricker Graydon regarding the Valley Township JED expansion petition. November 6th, a letter dated November 6, 2024, the council clerk had received notification from Ohio Division of Liquor Control that Vila Nail and Spa LLC, doing business as Vila Nail and Spa, has filed for a liquor license. November 18, 2024, a letter received, notice to legislative authorities in regards to objections to renewal of a retail law or liquor permit submitted by Department of Commerce Division of Liquor Control.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the communications. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. We did jump the gun in Finance Committee to say there would not be a special presentation this evening. At this time, I would like to ask the mayor to address council and community members regarding the water emergency that occurred this past week.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, as we all know, about 3 p.m. today, the boil alert for Lancaster City water was lifted. I don't know how that got shut off, but my apologies. Again, the boil alert was lifted at 3 p.m., but how did we get here? So on Saturday, Director Woody was contacted by our water department advising her of maintenance issues at the South Water Treatment Plant. These were unforeseen, unplanned. The issues were that contamination was getting into our, essentially where the water comes into the plant. It was getting into what is essentially a filtration system in levels that were essentially causing our process to not work appropriately. So water department has been working on this for quite some time, and they thought, several times they thought they had it fixed. And I have to apologize because I don't know exactly what a skid does, but the water enters the system and goes through a skid unit that captures contaminants. Those contaminants, typically, it takes three months or longer for a skid to become full and have to be cleaned. That was happening in about a week and a half. At $14,000 for each cleaning of these skids and getting them ready to go again, it was alarming. So experts were consulted, contractors were consulted. Our own water department, people who have significant experience, had never seen anything happening quite like this, and they really couldn't figure out why. Our department superintendent came up with a thought. He ran it by the experts, and it was that the wellhead is down below the surface, underwater. It connects with a stainless steel pipe and a coupling. That coupling, over time, had separated, allowing water to cascade into the wellhead, causing contaminants to be fed back into the system that shouldn't be there. Iron, magnesium, that type of material. They then consulted the EPA about the issue, and the EPA gave advice, and that advice was that needed to be fixed. Understanding there were no readings of contamination, but if you fix your system by shutting it down, that is where your potential contamination will result from. So any disruption in the system, whether it be disruption in pressure or taking the system offline, requires an automatic precautionary boil alert. It's precautionary because we don't want contamination to get into the system. So when the system goes out of service, we fire it back up. For a short period of time after that, we test the water to make sure it's clear of any contaminant. And the EPA has a 24-hour waiting period for that testing. So we test the water. We were confident that it was clear yesterday, but that's not the requirement. The requirement is independent testing has to be done away from the city of Lancaster and verified by the EPA, and then they give us clearance to put the system back in service. We don't believe at any time there was any significant issues with the quality of the water. However, EPA policy procedures require this just to make sure that the water that's going into the system is quality water that we can count on, that the community is safe to drink it, and that we would drink it. So part of it was a procedural issue with the EPA, and we needed to fix this problem. As far as anyone can remember, Lancaster's never had a shutdown of the system. No one can remember one. I've been here 63 years. I don't remember one. If anybody remembers one, please let me know. You would enlighten me on something. That means that we typically have good quality drinking water going out to this community, and the water department does a very good job. This is a very unusual occurrence. Stainless steel is made to last. The couplings are made to last. The plant is 24 years old, approximately 24 years old. That should have been a 50-year pipe coming out of that wellhead. But the coupling separated, causing the problem, and it really had to be fixed. And that's why we ended up in the situation we were in. Again, I'm no water plant expert, but typically we can move from one well to another without taking our facility offline. That was not able to be done in this particular situation, and the experts would have to explain that in better detail than I could. But they tried everything they could to keep the plant online, assuring safe drinking water was coming out. We needed to fix this problem. The costs were extraordinary, but not only the cost, obviously we still had iron and magnesium and other materials infiltrating the water system. So on Saturday, when that happened, EPA has a kind of a template on information that you release to the public. And they're not public officials, elected officials like we are sitting around this room. They're bureaucrats running the EPA, and they have their job to do. And the press release they agreed upon, understand this went all the way through from our contact at the EPA to the State of Ohio EPA director. This is a big deal. 42,000 people in this city, drinking water not available. It's a big deal. So they ran it up the flagpole. We got a press release out there. I am not happy with the press release, the way it was written. I believe that unanticipated or emergency should have been in there so the public would know that this was not planned maintenance. This was an unusual occurrence that we didn't know was going to happen. We could not plan for. We couldn't give advance notice because we didn't know ourselves that we were going to take the plant offline. I would have been happier with a more detailed, informative press release. But also, in addition to that, when we put that press release out, we put it out via TV, radio, print, social media. We shared it on city websites. We shared it with county. We shared it with all the large, the hospital, Chamber of Commerce, and many other organizations throughout the city trying to get the information out. But the truth is, we have to do better than what we did. We have to, and we do have some avenues that we can pursue so that we have better communication in emergency situations, regardless of whether it's water or storms or flooding or any other type of emergency. And that is something that I promise we will and can do. With that said, currently we have a system that anyone in the community can sign up for at our website to get alerts from the city. Our website is www.ci.lancaster.oh.us. At the bottom of that page, it talks about alerts and or what uses a different word than alerts, but notify me. Notify me. You go down, you enter information and notify me, and you can choose to be alerted from everything from the main page to any other things you might be interested, legal notices, codes and zoning, et cetera. But more specifically, if you get notifications from the main page, you're going to get every emergency notification the city sends out. That's a step I would like everybody in the community to take right away. But in the meantime, we're going to solve our problem on better communication. And we do have, I think we know some technology we can use. Again, there is no 100% way to notify the public of any emergency, but we believe we can notify everyone's cell phone in the area. Of course, you have to have the cell phone with you. You have to read it, but it's a much better communication tool than what we did. What we did not get the information out to everyone. It doesn't meet my standard. We have to do better. But with that said, you send information to the media, you hope they release it. I was told that people saw things on Channel 4 but didn't see it on Channel 10 or whatever it might be. That's one step. We're still going to do those steps. We're going to still give it to the radio, TV, print media, social media, but then we're going to blast it out on cell phones or whatever mechanism we can to get it out there. I did have a caller today thought that we should send 19-year-old teenagers to knock on everybody's door. That's a great idea, but it would have been very tough. It was getting dark, and I think they would have been knocking at 3 a.m. But the thought of getting the notice out is something that we have to do a better job with. So, and I know that many of you have received phone calls from your constituents. Those concerns are valid. We're going to do better. So I think we do have, again, technology we believe that we can use going forward. This will not happen again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we have any questions or inquiries from council members? Councilmember Bizjak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mayor, Madam SSD, and the Water Department, first, I just want to say thank you for all your effort on this. I only have one question for you. Is there anything that we on council can do to help you out with this effort? That's all.
Well, if we come forward with any cost on this emergency notice system, I would hope you would support it.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Leuchtenberg.
Amber Alerts, that goes out to everybody. Is that technology not available to us for an
That
emergency?
technology is not available. Amber Alert is strictly missing child alert, and there's a huge criteria, and sometimes you'll see that there's a missing child and there's no Amber Alert. It's because even all missing children don't qualify for an Amber Alert. You have to have significant amount of information to justify the Amber Alert. But with that said, we're talking about the same type of technology. It would just be a different name for it. But it's still going to reach cell phones in our community. And it'll be an alert system the same way. So it's similar to an Amber Alert.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Councilmember Teener.
I will say, at Children's, we have a Chaz or something, and we get even water alerts from communities I've never heard of. I mean, you'll get them, but that is one thing. Anyway, with being on the Water Committee, I was at that meeting Friday. It was just a regularly scheduled meeting. So the gentleman from the South Water Plant was there, and he said they had been working 24 hours a day, overtime. How long has this been going on? Because for us to have that meeting, I knew nothing about this. So Friday we had this meeting. Saturday, this all started. And we even got a text from you saying, well, we'll let people know like not today or tomorrow. And I'm like texting you going, yeah, sooner better than later. So how long has this been going on though? I mean, for this to be, because he was talking about filters and paying overtime, and they've been there, they're exhausted. So was that part of what happened over the weekend?
Well, the short answer is yes, it's part of what happened, but I think I was fairly clear that we did not anticipate having to shut the plant down, nor did we anticipate a water boil alert as a result of that. They've been working on that problem. The water plant, both our north plant and our south plant, can operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, typically without interruption. This was an unusual occurrence, and I think I explained it in fairly good detail. I'd be happy to go over it again if somebody
Well,
did.
that's fine, but he was pretty concerned on Friday, and I'd even put in my text to you, I've never seen him that exhausted and that, I mean, he did, so.
That's all true.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, so how often is the water tested at the lab? How often do they test?
Repeatedly, multiple times a day, every day of the year, in accordance with EPA guidelines, and they will shut you down if you don't comply.
Okay, so last night, this morning at 12:43, talking about notifying people, I went on our website, just the Lancaster City website. So talk about, that really should have been that notice. I know it's hard to get a hold of everybody, but that notice should have been the first thing that popped up on the website. It wasn't. The first thing that popped up on the website in little squares was Lancaster Council all in one agenda, then Thanksgiving Day, and then you had to scroll, and then it said yard waste, and then it said boiler advisory. So, I think in the future, I know this is hard, this is something that happened, unexpectedly, but probably the boiler alert should have been the first thing that popped up on the website.
Absolutely, and that's already been fixed. If you go to the webpage now.
Well, I didn't know if you were aware of it, so.
When you go across the top, you'll see in bold letters, it says alert, and then it says boil, alert, canceled, et cetera.
Yeah.
That technology is available, and absolutely, that needs to be corrected.
So question I'm getting from people, should they be flushing the lines and changing water filters?
Well, the answer is yes, and that they should flush their lines. I
Okay,
believe
because
the
I
recommendation.
don't know that was, maybe there was a second notice that was put on.
But what I would tell you is that at no time did we believe our water was contaminated, but EPA recommendation is to flush your lines, and those guidelines are on our website under the Water Department. I would recommend that people follow those guidelines if they feel they need to.
Was that council? Thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you for that update. Is there any other council member who has any inquiry? Seeing none. Mr. Mayor, I know that you were mentioning the technology as a potential for getting to the cell phones. Fairfield County EMA has that capability and will partner with the community as needed.
Absolutely. We're in contact with them, and we'll make sure, again, we might have additional technology beyond that. The EMA is certainly a resource for us.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll now move on to petitions and memorials.
Oh, there are no petitions or memorials this evening.
Thank you, Clerk. Scott. We'll now move to permission of voters and taxpayers to address council. Are there any audience members here that wishes to address City Council this evening?
We can correct that.
We'll remind individuals that they need to sign the sheet and provide their name and address, and you are limited to 3 minutes.
Good evening, President Porter, Mayor, council members, and other leaders of our community. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name is Brian Everett. I reside at 201 South High Street here in the city limits, and I wanted to just, again, talk about pedestrian safety with respect to our roads. I am aware of 2 crashes involving pedestrians in the last week. From speaking to some people that are going to talk right after me, I think there may have been more that I was not aware of. I understand as we discuss the budget that changes which address the transportation needs of all of our community members cost money and cannot happen overnight. The system we currently have is car focused and designed to move cars as quickly as possible, which doesn't lend itself well to not only the safety of pedestrians or bicyclists or other people in other modes of transportation, but doesn't lend itself well to a community. That system has been in place for pushing 100 years, so I know this isn't going to happen overnight, but I would suggest that there are quick and low-cost ways that we as a city can look at making changes immediately. As cheap as paint, with painting at intersections that causes visual narrowing of the street and typically will psychologically induce drivers to slow down. From there, you have plastic bollards that can be used for what's known as daylighting at intersections or where there are crosswalks, preventing cars from parking illegally past signs and preventing pedestrians from having to go out into the street to be able to see if it is safe for them to proceed the remainder of the way. Also allowing cars to see those pedestrians. Granted, 99% of them don't know that Ohio law requires they yield to pedestrians, but it's a start. And then from there, things to slow down cars that are physical instead of paint. Whether those are chicanes or bump outs, whether those are raised crosswalks that show that the priority is not only cars, but that pedestrians have equal access and equal rights in those roads, that also act as speed bumps to slow cars. I would ask that the city council and the rest of the community leaders here focus on some type of progress, even if that progress is small, because it takes a step to start the journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to address council at this time?
Hello again. Pedestrian safety as well. My name is Levi Bartos. I reside in the city limits in Lancaster. On Monday, November 18th and 19th, as well as Friday, November 22nd, and Saturday, the 23rd, we've had pedestrians hit on each of those days. My concern is the amount of jaywalking. Today, I witnessed 2 adult males cross Main Street from South Broad Street while the people on Main Street had the green light, causing all of us to come to a complete stop, and the first car swerving around the last guys that took their time with no care for their safety or if they caused a crash. So while the city is working on pedestrian safety and continuing to work on it, making the city safer, in the most respectful way to all of the people, if you guys can start enforcing laws that are being broken, like jaywalking or not abiding by laws like that. My second concern is to both of our courts. In my eyes, the lack of accountability from some probation officers. I feel like the same thing goes here with the lack of accountability with jaywalking that I see. And it will continue to happen until they be held accountable. Some of the defendants on probation catching new charges, racking up warrants, and they will not change because I feel like Lancaster has such a big problem with recidivism. Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you, sir. And can you please be sure to give your address and sign in on the sheet, please? Are there any other individuals here this evening that wish to address City Council?
Greetings, members of City Council. My name is Tammy Beck. I live at 1570 East Main Street, Lot 43, here in the city limits. I'm here today to address you all about the boil alert that was issued on Saturday, November 23rd, 2024. I got no notice directly from the city regarding the boil alert. The first notice that I got was from the children's ministry director at my church. They alerted me about 7 p.m. on Saturday. Supposedly the notice went out sooner in the evening. That caused a bit of a panic within my mind and my household. My mother and I had to spend extra money we really didn't have to get drinking water in my house. I didn't want to risk to any member of my family getting sick, especially me expecting. I'm very disappointed in the city that the fact that the notice came out so late in the evening and not everyone was able to hear about it. If the city knew about it sooner, this notice should have been sent out sooner than what it did. Plus, the city needs to understand that some people do not have access to social media or the internet. The city should have something set up similar to what Lancaster City Schools has in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other individuals at this time that wish to address Lancaster City Council?
Good evening. My name is Tom James. I reside at 352 Mound Street here in Lancaster. I'm not going to pile on with the communication for the boil alert, but this morning as I was at the Y for my workout, I was accosted by half a dozen people that knew I had been on council before and that had something to do with the wastewater, water treatment, and stormwater and environmental engineering. And I tried to caution them on, you don't want to jump to conclusions, but the wording could have been a little bit better. And I really appreciate the comments and the things that you're going to do to make this communication much better. But you never want to underestimate the power of networking, because once I got the word on Saturday night, I was able to call at least 12 of my members in my neighborhood, and they in turn called people. And it's kind of like a geometric progression where that really made a big difference. But once again, that doesn't necessarily ensure that you're going to reach everybody. Having been close to all the people that work at our water treatment system, there are some really darn good people, and they know what they're doing. And the skid you mentioned, Mayor McDaniel, they're bag fillers. And unfortunately, once they get completely plugged with iron, you can't get water in anymore. Now, iron itself is not a hazardous material, but it can cause havoc with the plant and trying to keep it running. And they really didn't have a choice. At one point in time, you just had to finally shut it down, fix the collar, and continue on from there. So I have to praise your efforts to do that and in that process. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I want
Yes,
to
yes.
correct a statement I made earlier to Becky's question. We had a correspondence with the water plant manager, and no flushing is required. The reason no flushing is required is because the samples were all negative, both before and after the incident. So no flushing is required. You can flush if you'd like to, but no flushing is required.
Thank you, Mayor, for that clarification. Is there any other individual who'd like to address City Council this evening? Seeing none, we thank you for your attendance at today's meeting. We'll move to the reports of standing committees.
Finance Committee minutes dated November 4th, 2024, submitted by Mr. Wolfinger. Law Committee agenda and minutes dated November 5th, 2024, submitted by Mrs. Kreitz. Safety Committee minutes dated November 1st, 2024, submitted by Mr. Bizjak. Finance Committee agenda dated November 2nd, 2024, submitted by Mr. Wolfinger. Water pollution agenda and minutes dated November 24th, submitted by Mr. Wing, and Finance Committee agenda dated November 22nd, 2024, submitted by Mr. Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Reports of special committees.
There are no special committee reports.
Thank you. Public hearings, we have none on the agenda. We will now move to the reading of resolutions. We'll move to the third reading of temporary resolution 114-24.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for various construction administration services for the solids handling replacement project. Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Ms. Teener.
Councilmember Wing.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 114-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 114-24. Any discussion, Councilmember Wing?
Yes, this is located at the Water Pollution Control Facility on Lawrence Street. Will be funded by a $1.2 million Ohio EPA loan.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 114-24 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 115-24.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids for the solids handling facility replacement project. Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Mr. Ailes.
Councilmember Wing.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 115-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 115-24. Discussion, Councilmember Wing.
Yes, this pertains to the same project we just discussed, and plan is to go out to bid in January.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary resolution 115-24 passes 9-0. Temporary resolution 117-24.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with Fairfield Healthcare Professionals, Inc. to provide professional health care and wellness services to City of Lancaster employees and their dependents, and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Bizjak.
Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 117-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 117-24. Discussion, Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Yes, this has to do with a contract that the city is entering into with Fairfield Healthcare Professionals. to augment wellness checks for city employees, very similar to a contract that the county has and has found to be very good for them. And so we're moving in that direction as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 11724 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 11824.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract with the Renaissance Counseling and Consultation to provide professional mental health counseling services to City of Lancaster employees and their dependents and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Wolfinger.
Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 118-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 11824. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Yes, this is similar to the previous resolution, just having to do with mental health counseling services the city is entering into a contract for.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 11824 passes 9-0. Now move to the second reading of resolutions. We have none. We'll now move on to the first reading of resolutions with temporary resolution number 129-24.
A resolution to authorize the City of Lancaster Auditor Tricia Nettles to request an advance of funds from the Fairfield County Treasurer James Bonson for the city's apportionment of property tax settlements for 2025. This is the Finance Committee, Mr. Wolfinger and Mr. Ailes.
Councilmember Wolfinger.
Yes, first of two readings, please.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 12924. Temporary resolution 13024.
A resolution to authorize then and now certificates for the Community Development Block Grant 2073, CHIP Home Program Fund 2083, and the Healthy Homes Grant 2026, year-end 2024 project expenditures. Economic Development Committee, Ms. Hoops and Mrs. Kreitz.
Councilmember Hoop.
Yes, this is first of three readings. Thank you.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 13024. Temporary resolution 13124.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract for the construction of the Zane Alley Sewer Replacement Project. Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Mr. Ailes.
Councilmember Wing.
First of two readings, please.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 13124. Temporary resolution 13224.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering agreement for the 2025 sewer rehabilitation project. Water Pollution Committee, Mr. Wing and Ms. Teener.
Councilmember Wing.
This will be the first of two readings, please.
First of two readings on temporary resolution 13224. Temporary resolution 13324.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the construction and inspection of the 2025 Street Improvement Program paving project. Public Works Committee, Ms. Teener and Mr. Luchtenberg.
Councilmember Teener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 133.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 133-24. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 133-24 passes 9-0. Councilmember Teener.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 133.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution numbered 13324. Councilmember Teener, any discussion?
Yes, it's just so we can get the project moving for next year for the street paving.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 13324 passes 9-0. Temporary Resolution 13424.
A resolution to amend a portion or appropriation budgets and to subsequently amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor. Finance Committee, Mr. Wolfinger and Mr. Ailes.
Councilmember Wolfinger.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on Temporary Resolution 13424. We will now move on to the reading of ordinances. There are no third readings of ordinances this evening. We will now move to second reading with Temporary Ordinance 4224.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum principal amount of $360,000 in anticipation for the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the costs of the renovation of an existing building for use by the city's municipal court, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declare an emergency. Finance Committee, Mr. Wolfinger, Mr. Ailes.
Councilmember Wolfinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that council suspends the rules and waives the third reading of temporary ordinance 42-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of Temporary Ordinance 4224. Any further discussion? Councilmember Wolfinger.
Thank you. This is an annual piece that we will have as long as we have debt outstanding that dealt with the renovation building of Edie Road in order for it to expand several years ago.
Okay. I think this was the municipal court.
I'm sorry?
This was the municipal court, not Edie Road.
I'm sorry.
Cost overrun.
I will save that comment, bring it down, because it's the next one down.
All right.
This is the balance of the loan will be paid down $180,000 from $540 to $360 and renewed for an additional year, maturing at the end of 2025.
Thank you. So any further discussion on the motion to suspend? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 9-0. Now move to Councilmember Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance number 42-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4224. Any further discussion?
No.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to pass temporary ordinance 4224 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 4324.
An ordinance providing the issuance and sale of revenue notes in the aggregate principal amount of $715,555.42 to pay costs of improving Edie Road, Memorial Drive, and Michael's Way by grading, widening, paving, curving, and improving bridges and railroad crossings, relocating utilities and installing sidewalks, traffic signals and signs, and water, sanitary and water lines and facilities, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declare an emergency. Finance Committee, Mr. Wolfinger and Mr. Ailes.
Councilmember Wolfinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make the motion that council suspends its rules and waives the third reading on temporary ordinance number 43-24.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4324. Councilmember Wolfinger.
Again, this is the Edie Road renovation construction project. It was put on the books several years ago, and this is the annual pay down, and we'll have a few more years of it going forward.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to suspend? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4324 passes 9-0. Councilmember Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance number 43-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4324. Councilmember Wolfinger, any further
No
discussion?
additional comments.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 4324 passes 9-0. Temporary ordinance 4424.
An ordinance providing the issuance and sale of a revenue note in the aggregate principal amount of $221,964.23 to reimburse Flagstar Bank, FSB, for a draw on the letter of credit in the connections with the cost of improving Edie Road, Memorial Drive, and Michael's Way by grading, widening, paving, curbing, and improving bridges and railroad crossings, relocating utilities, and installing sidewalks, traffic signals, and signs, and water, sanitary, and stormwater lines and facilities, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency. Finance Committee, Mr. Wolfinger and Mr. Ailes.
Councilmember Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspends the rules and waives the third reading of temporary ordinance 44-24.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4424. Any discussion, Councilmember Wolfinger?
Pretty much the same annual piece of legislation. It renews for 1 year, additional note involving the TIF project on Edie Road.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
No, sir.
Hearing none, please call a roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4424 passes 9-0. Councilmember Wolfinger.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion the council pass and gross as enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 44-24.
Second.
A motion second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4424. No discussion?
No more discussion.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 4424 passes 9-0. We now move to temporary ordinance 4524.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for the Information Technology Administrator, Office of the Clerk of Court, employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio, commencing the first pay period of 2025, and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Bizjack.
Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 45-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4524. Discussion, Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Yes, Mr. President. This ordinance and the next 5 ordinances are all just yearly ordinances to establish benefits and titles, compensation for various people and positions within the city. And we need to get this on the books for the auditor quickly, so we're asking to suspend the third reading.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4524 passes 8-1. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 4524.
Second.
A motion and second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4524. Any further discussion?
None.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 4524 passes 8-1. Temporary ordinance 4624.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for Fairfield County Municipal Court Management and Professional Personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2025, and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Wolfinger.
Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 46-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4624. Councilmember Luchtenberg, any further discussion?
None at this time.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener? Nope. Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4624 passes 8-1. Motion, or excuse me, Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion. Council pass and gross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 4624.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4624. Any further discussion?
None.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to pass and engross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4624 passes 8-1. Temporary ordinance 4724.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for Fairfield County Municipal Court judicial and probation personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2025, and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Bizjack.
Councilmember Bizjack, or excuse me, Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion. Council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 4724.
Second.
It's not marked on here. Excuse me, just a moment, please. It's not marked as star. Is it a star?
It should be a star version.
Okay, all right. It's not marked on the agenda as a star version, so we're going to have to.
Move to amend the motion?
We got to go back to substitute.
Sure.
If you could, please.
So I'd like to make a motion, Mr. President, to replace ordinance temporarily numbered 4724 by replacing it with ordinance temporarily numbered 4724 star as given to the clerk in writing prior to tonight's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to replace temporary ordinance 4724 with temporary ordinance 4724 star. Any discussion, Councilmember Luchtenberg?
I'd like to ask the City Safety Service Director to address this one.
Yes, thank you. As the mayor mentioned in the Finance Committee meeting, we did receive an order from the judge adding a part-time special project security officer. And so we just received that this morning, so that is why you have a star version in front of you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to replace temporary ordinance 4724 with temporary ordinance 4724 star passes 8-1. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 47-24 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to waive the third reading for temporary ordinance 4724 star. I'll just dispense with discussion if there is none, and we can move to call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4724 star passes 8-1. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion the council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 4724 star.
Second.
A motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4724 star. No discussion. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Winger? Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to pass and engross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4724 star passes 8-1. Temporary ordinance 4824 star.
An ordinance to establish the benefits, titles, and compensation for management and professional personnel employed by the City of Lancaster for Ohio for the 2025 year and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Wolfinger.
Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to replace ordinance temporarily numbered 4824 by replacing it with ordinance temporarily numbered 4824 star as given to the clerk in writing prior to tonight's meeting.
Second.
A motion and second to replace temporary ordinance 4824 with temporary ordinance 4824 star as given to the clerk in writing before the meeting. Please, or discussion.
I'd like to ask the Service Safety Director to address this, please.
Yes. Again, based on our last council meeting, again, the mayor alluded to this in the Finance Committee meeting. Council had mentioned wanting a facilities manager. And so we did go ahead and add that into the pay ordinance, and that because we added that position after the original legislation was submitted to you, we needed to do a star version for that as well.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call a roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
No.
Ms. Teener? No. Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to replace temporary ordinance 4824 with temporary ordinance 4824 star passes 7-2. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion the council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 4824.
Second. Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4824 star. No discussion, I'm assuming. Please call a roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yep.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
No.
Mr. Teener? Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 4824 star passes 7-2. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion the council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 4824 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4824 star. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4824 star passes 8-1. Now move to temporary ordinance 4924 star.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for those employees who are not members of the recognized bargaining unions employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2025, and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Bizjack.
Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to replace ordinance temporarily numbered 4924 by replacing it with ordinance temporarily numbered 4924 star as given to the clerk in writing prior to tonight's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to replace temporary ordinance 4924 with temporary ordinance 4924 star as given to the clerk in writing before tonight's meeting. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
City Safety Service Director, Carrie Woody, please.
So we actually have 3 changes in this ordinance since it was first introduced. Our first change is in stormwater engineering. We are removing one of the engineering positions that has not been filled in several years. I was not aware of that, and Stephen Wellstead brought that to my attention, so we are going to go ahead and remove that since it's an unnecessary position. And then we have 2 other changes. In the fire department, up until a couple of years ago, we had always had 2 administrative assistants. Through attrition, we were down to 1, and that was going well. However, we did have the one administrative assistant just resign from the city. And so it was the desire of the fire chief to go ahead and bring back not necessarily 2 full-time, but to make it 1 full-time, 1 part-time to help in the future so that it's not so overwhelming for one person. So in the original ordinance that was presented to you, we were requesting an office manager position. So we are actually going to change that office manager position and replace it with 1 full-time administrative assistant 3, which is what it had been traditionally, and then adding a second part-time administrative assistant 2.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion to replace? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to replace temporary ordinance 4924 with temporary ordinance 4924 star passes 8-1. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the 3rd reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 49-24 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the 3rd reading of temporary ordinance 4924 star. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
No.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
No.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the 3rd reading of temporary ordinance 4924 star passes 6-3. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 4924 star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4924 star. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 4924 star passes 8-1.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the motion to suspend, what was the vote?
6-3.
That doesn't meet the 75% threshold, does it?
So
Since we have 1 member not actually, having a seat at the moment, it does. It's the number of those present at the meeting to vote, and we have,
he's no longer on council.
it's 75%, right?
He resigned from council.
Yeah, he's not.
So you had 6 out of 9?
Yeah, he resigned, so he's not like he's here.
So 0.666. So 7, you had to have 7. He's right.
Okay.
I apologize.
All right. Well,
Some suspension.
okay.
Yep, thanks for paying attention, Tom.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm not used to not having the folks here. So we did not pass the motion to suspend. So we will move back to Councilmember Luchtenberg. And so that would be the second of 3 readings.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll move to temporary ordinance 5024.
An ordinance to establish the compensation for seasonal interns employed by the city of Lancaster, Ohio, commencing during the summer of 2025, and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Wolfinger.
Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the 3rd reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 50-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the 3rd reading of temporary ordinance 5024. Any discussion?
No, sir.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
No.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 5024 passes 7-2. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass and engross and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 50-24.
Second.
That was Councilmember Wolfinger.
Yeah, that was second. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You didn't hear it?
No. So motion to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 5024. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop? Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 5024 passes 8-1. Temporary ordinance 5124 star.
An ordinance to establish benefits, titles, and compensation for the Parks and Recreation personnel employed by the City of Lancaster, Ohio for the year 2025 and to declare an emergency. Administrative Committee, Mr. Luchtenberg and Mr. Bizjack.
Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion to replace ordinance temporarily numbered 5124 with ordinance temporarily numbered 5124 star as given to the clerk in writing prior to tonight's meeting.
Second.
A motion is second to replace temporary ordinance 5124 with temporary ordinance 5124 star as given to the clerk in writing prior to the meeting. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to replace temporary ordinance 5124 with temporary ordinance 5124 star passes 8-1. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of ordinance temporarily numbered 5124 star.
Second.
A motion is second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary ordinance 5124 star. Any discussion?
I'd like to call on the city safety director to discuss this one.
Thank you, Councilman Luchtenberg. This is the last one. We have one change in this ordinance, and that is our park superintendent received notification that the office manager for the Parks Department is retiring in February. So he asked to add a second office manager to train with Carol because she's been here for many, many, many years. So we added in a second office manager, and then we included in one of the office managers that it will not be filled after Carol retires in February. So it'll go back to one as soon as Carol retires.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
None.
Please call the roll on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
No.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Luchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
No.
Ms. Teener?
Nope.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
And Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Motion to suspend fails due to 3/4 vote necessary by a vote of 6-3. Councilmember Luchtenberg.
So I guess this is the second of third readings.
Second of 3 readings on temporary ordinance 5124 star. We'll now move on to first readings of ordinances beginning with temporary ordinance 5224.
An ordinance to grant the South Central Power Company, its successors and assigns a franchise for the right to acquire, construct, maintain, and operate in the streets, therefore as their affairs, alleys, bridges, and public places of the city of Lancaster, Ohio, and its successors, lines for the transmission and distribution of electric energy to the city of Lancaster and the inhabitants thereof for light, heat, power, and other purposes, and for the transmission of the same within through or across said city of Lancaster and to declare an emergency. This is a law committee, Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Wolfinger.
Councilmember Kreitz.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary ordinance 5224. Temporary ordinance 5324.
An ordinance to deed two parcels of city property 053580610 and 05358030000 containing 3.009 plus or minus acres of land from the city of the city to be consolidated into one parcel. Law Committee, Mrs. Kreitz and Mr. Bizjack.
Councilmember Kreitz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. As discussed during Finance Committee, the city owns two pieces of property out on East Main Street, one next to the fire department. They want to combine the parcels so that the fire department can build a maintenance and supply building, or maintenance and repair facility behind. And this is to allow the mayor to execute the documents to get that done.
So would you like to move to suspend?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I would like to move to suspend, sorry. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third readings of ordinance temporarily numbered 52-24.
53.
53-24.
Second.
Second, we have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 5324. We've had a bit of discussion on it. Please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
Yes.
Mr. Wing?
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
Temporary, the motion to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary ordinance 5324 passes 9-0. Councilmember Kreitz.
Yes, let's try this again. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record ordinance temporarily numbered 53-24.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 5324. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Ailes?
Yes.
Mr. Bizjack?
Yes.
Mrs. Kreitz?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoop?
Yes.
Mr. Leuchtenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Ms. Teener?
No. Oh, no, yes. I'm so sorry.
We're off the ordinances for
Mayor's on a roll. She was in a mode.
This is the combining the two parcels.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I know. Yes, sorry.
Mr.
I was on a
Wing?
roll. Sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Wolfinger?
Yes.
That's funny.
All right. Temporary, the motion pass, engross, and enter upon the written record. Temporary ordinance 5324 passes 9-0 with a little bit of effort on our parts. Tabled legislation, I think we heard earlier in finance that temporary resolution 11024 star is still on the table, and we won't be taking that off this evening unless there's a motion. So we're done with that. We'll move now.
The walk-in piece.
We have a walk-in.
Oh, we do have the walk-in piece, I'm sorry.
5424.
Sorry about that, folks. It's a night. So,
You're two
you want to
ahead of
read
me.
it?
Absolutely.
We do have one walk-in piece of legislation this evening.
An ordinance to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into a lease contract with the Fairfield County Commissioners for the second floor of the City Annex Building 123 East Chestnut Street for juvenile court services.
That's temporary ordinance 5424, and the sponsor would be?
Administrative Committee and Mr. Leuchtenberg and Mr. Wolfinger.
Councilmember Leuchtenberg. I think it's first of three.
First of three readings?
First of two readings.
First of two readings.
Two readings. And I don't need to second this.
Okay, so, okay. First of two readings on temporary ordinance 5424. And with that, I think we've concluded our legislation this evening, and we've gone through the tabled legislation. Any unfinished business by any council member?
Mr. President.
Councilmember Wing.
I want to take some time to digest Mayor McDaniel's comments about the water situation over the weekend, and want to be sure to thank the mayor, service safety director, and all of the employees of the water department who have been working 24/7 to address the situation. For those council members who were at Friday's committee meeting, you could clearly see the weight of the situation on the superintendent's shoulders. So very serious, and thank you for all your efforts with that. And just wanted to also publicly state that I support and like to be of assistance in helping get sorry, I lost my train of thought again. Emergency communications out. I think that's something we need to work on, and I'm happy to help with that.
Thank you. Any further unfinished business from council members at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to new business. There was on my agenda appointment of a council person to serve on the tree commission, but the lucky take for that was last meeting, and Councilmember Ailes did fill that position, so we thank him for that. We'll move to the announcements of scheduled meetings.
Mr. President.
Yes, Councilmember Schooner.
Just in terms of new business to address Mr. Everett and Mr. Bartos in terms of the pedestrian safety. I mean, I think Mr. Everett's going to come every meeting to mention it, which is fine. It's a nice reminder. It's definitely a long-term plan that we have to look at. I think in the short term, and Chief Snyder's not here, but the directed patrol unit for LPD, you always hear great things about it. It's something new. It's something that's, I think, a little more complaint-driven for them to focus on certain things in the community. If I am wrong in that, let me know. But I think the biggest issue is you see those complaints, and I see them on Facebook more often than not. And the question I have is, are we calling LPD and saying, hey, there is the speeding in the neighborhood, there is this in the neighborhood, or are we just posting it on Facebook? And as everybody has seen, some of us troll Facebook a little more than others. And, you know, everybody is like, hey, this boil alert notice on Facebook wasn't sufficient enough. But Facebook's sufficient enough to complain about those things, but are we actually calling the right department? So I'd be interested to see if, you know, we have the reduced speed mobile sign that we move around. Directed patrol unit could do the same thing if they're getting those complaints. And realistically, it's like we see plenty of complaints. There are plenty of people that don't know how to drive, don't know how to obey basic traffic laws. I'm going to mention Mr. Everett again because I was up and happened to be picking up my grandkids from a traffic accident at the intersection in front of your house the other night, and I was there before LPD, so I controlled the intersection because there's a T-bone accident and people are still wanting just to flow in and out of that. And you know, the girl she had stopped. She assumed it was a four-way stop, and then she just came out and T-boned, and she was upset. But at the same time, we're talking about maybe it's a simple, we at least start with, they're already on the payroll. Do we use directed patrol unit to start cracking down on basic moving violations? And whether that's worth their time or not, you know, it's something I'd like to hear from Chief at some point, but the mayor knows. So I think that's a way to start what you're asking for in terms of a long-term plan for pedestrians, right? So just food for thought.
Thank you, Councilmember Schoonover. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I just want to reply to that. I think you're right. The Directed Patrol Unit was created specifically to address not just traffic problems, but problems throughout the city. I think we also have some other projects in the pipeline that people know about, pedestrian safety projects, as far as additional sidewalk. We are currently studying pedestrian crossings on Memorial Drive to get people across, as Mr. Everett mentioned. Sometimes that means getting them halfway across on one light cycle and the rest of the way across on the second light cycle. But we need to have protected areas for them to be at. So we have a study that we've paid for, that council's approved, currently in the works on pedestrian safety on Memorial Drive. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think probably in the last week, I know of at least 4 pedestrian crashes. I don't think there was significant injury on any of them, but could have been significant. Pedestrians as well as motor vehicles aren't always paying attention. But a pedestrian in a crosswalk isn't being yielded to, and that's something PD could enforce. And we'll speak with the chief about that. He'll be totally on board, but that's really not the ultimate way to solve this problem. I think there's a lot of things we can do better. Some of the things we have in progress, sidewalks on East Main Street, sidewalks we built on South Broad, those are all helpful, steps in the right direction. But we need to study the problem, look at it. It's going to cost money to address some of it, but we can definitely make an impact on pedestrian safety, bicyclist safety, wheelchair accessible safety. And we can also do things, I think, with signage to draw better attention to the areas. You know, I meant raised crosswalks were mentioned. That is a dual purpose. It draws attention to the crosswalk, but it also serves as a speed bump. And I know we're resistant to speed bumps, speed humps, et cetera, et cetera. There's a good reason for that, but it doesn't mean in our heavily pedestrian areas they shouldn't be considered. So we'll speak with the chief, and feel free, any one of you would like to speak with Chief Snyder about a problem area, including pedestrian safety. Feel free to reach out to him, but we'll reach out to him on your behalf also.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know Service Safety Director Woody had indicated that we didn't have the special presentation tonight, but it was supposed to be LDOT. Is that correct? So maybe the next time they come in, they could also give us some updates about some of those issues as well. As Councilmember Ayers.
I've had a few instances in my ward where I've asked the directed patrol units to be involved, and they have, and successfully. I mean, and then they come back. I walked out my front door, and there's a policeman sitting in front of my house, and you know, I asked him what he was doing. He said, "Well, you had this complaint about 2 months ago, and we're just here to make sure that we follow up." And so they're involved, and it works. Yep. And I have to tell you a funny story. And one of the places was at the corner of Fair Avenue and Maple, Madison, running stop signs. My wife got stopped after I complained about people. My wife was one of the 80-some people that got stopped at the stop sign. She's going to kill me because she's watching, but I don't care.
Councilmember Skinner.
Just as a follow-up to clarify, when we were sitting here having the meeting, that's when directed patrol. I know that they are helpful with that, but I think the biggest part of my comment is you can't, and not saying anyone specifically here, but you can't just complain about it on Facebook right. And expect LPD to notice it. And we sit in plenty of these meetings, and there's a lot of projects in the works, but as far as like something that can happen tomorrow, it's start making those phone calls to the right people, and those things can start improving as we work to those bigger projects. So,
you can actually go online.
Yeah,
you don't even have to, if you can go right online and file the
complaint form. Yeah.
Councilmember Teener.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they do a good job with the speed limit. I've seen the big things out. They'll make sure it's your timed. And I know they were on Van Buren and what is that? I can't think what the name of it is. Brumfield, over by Glasgow Park, and they were sitting there, and I didn't know if they were looking for somebody to park. Here they were parked back, and they got, I don't know if there was 60-some or 80-some people speeding, and I guess it was 25. I had no idea. I've lived there 20-some years, didn't know it was 25 miles per hour, but also never got caught. I was smarter.
Well, thank you for that self-disclosure. We appreciate that. Okay, if there's no other comments, I'm very happy we were able to provide that feedback, and we'll now move to the regularly scheduled city council meetings.
We have December 9th at 6:30 p.m. council chambers, January 13th at 6:30 p.m. That's 2025 at 6:30 p.m. council chambers.
Thank you. Special meetings, we have none scheduled. Regularly scheduled committee meetings.
Service committee meeting December 6th at 8 a.m. at City Hall, 1897 Conference Room. Public Works December committee I can't talk now. December 13th was canceled at 7:30. Administrative Service Committee, December 18th at 8 a.m., City Hall, 1897 Conference Room.
Thank you. Reading of bills.
MNCO, $177.43, and Amazon for $33.90 paid on a PNC card.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pay the bills. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Bills are paid. Executive session, we have no need. We're going to move for an adjournment, but before we do, what folks in the audience saw tonight was a lot of work by a lot of people to keep this meeting going. You know, we had a lot of different things happening this evening, but what you saw was cooperation from everybody in this room. And we value that here at the City of Lancaster, and we appreciate the community coming to give us feedback as well. So thank you. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I'd like to make that motion, we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Please sign your legislation before you leave this evening.
I may need a place to sleep
yes.
tonight.